Netflix documentaries cover a wide range of content and genres. While some documentaries are described as scary or educational, there's another popular umbrella term that covers forgotten documentaries that take a deeper look into some of the very shocking cases, situations, and lifestyles. Each of these 5 films will secure your attention and evoke a sense of shock and disbelief frequently. Number 5. First released in 2012, The Imposter is a British-American documentary that covers Frederic Bourdin, a French trickster known for impersonating missing children. In 1994, a 13-year-old boy from Texas went missing. In 1997, Bourdin claimed that he was the child, Nicholas Barclay, for reasons unknown. He came forward to the Barclay family and provided a wild, embellished story about the supposed kidnapping. He claimed that he was kidnapped by Mexican, European, and US military personnel and was used as a toy for abuse carried out by the older men. After being used for a while, he was then transported from Texas to Spain, where he remained there for some time. Several officers in both the US and Spain fell for Bourdin's lies and believed he was the young boy whose family had been searching for him tirelessly for 3 years. The Barclay family took Bourdin in and apparently had no doubts that he was their child. This is particularly strange considering that at the time, Bourdin was several years older than Barclay. He also spoke with a strong French accent and differed greatly in physical appearance. Nicholas Barclay was a thin teen with blonde hair and blue eyes, while Bourdin was a little heavier and had dark hair and brown eyes. Despite all of these seemingly obvious differences, the Barclay family believed they'd reunited with their lost loved one and made no arguments. Some say the family were irresponsible and unaware of their child's true appearance. Others claimed that the family was suffering from denial and had accepted Bourdin into their home under an umbrella of blissful ignorance, too scared to face the truth. After some time, though, the truth was revealed. A private investigator, Charlie Parker, and an FBI agent named Nancy Fisher collected evidence to prove that Bourdin was an imposter. When they traveled to the Barclay home to share their findings with the family, Bourdin willingly provided a full confession. The documentary covers this strange case, directed by Bart Layton, and provides a much deeper and more detailed look into the case of Bourdin. The film provides interviews with various members of the Barclay family. Charles Parker, Nancy Fisher, and several other officials and officers, as well as Bourdin himself, also provide interviews. In the film, he provides explanations for his actions and describes each level of his impersonation methods. This film might not be considered scary, but it's clearly very strange and unsettling, yet entertaining. It's a terrifying thought to think that someone would impersonate a missing child and ultimately worsen the lives of the family. Number 4. This 2015 documentary titled Glory Days shares a shocking inside look into the club and nightlife scene of the 1990s in New York. After the death of famous artist Andy Warhol in '87, a new group of nightlife enthusiasts must follow in the steps of the alternative artist by keeping the club scene alive. This group was commonly referred to as the Club Kids, a group of misfits that showed off their personalities, shocking fashion sense, and overall artistic ideas. Although only 5 members were part of the original pack, many more were added to the scene that flowed into the early and mid-90s. Writer and director Raymond Fernandez took a step into the compelling story of the Club Kids in his documentary, which features reenactment scenes, fresh information, and personal interviews with the most notable members of the crew. The details provided in the documentary shine a bright light into the mysterious lives of each member and their usual debauchery. Shocking stories of drug use, dangerous romantic relationships, and the endless hunger for new and compelling art are all presented in the film. Perhaps the most shocking part comes from the personal interviews conducted with members such as Michael Alige, the undisputed leader of the cult-like club, and James St. James, a former club kid and famous fashion designer. During these interviews, details previously unknown to even the biggest Club Kid fans are shared in a storytelling style, which captivates the audience and even strikes a chord of concern. However, this isn't just an entertainment tale of an underground party life. Instead, midway through, it takes a dark turn as the film covers the crimes of the group leader, Michael Alige, and his then roommate, Robert Freeze Riggs. Allegedly, the pair were responsible for the untimely passing of former Limelight employee and reported drug dealer Andre Melendez. The crime occurred in March of 1996 and marked the inevitable downfall of the famous group. Members began to distance themselves from both the men after hearing the news. Michael and Robert were arrested 9 months after the crime, leaving the formerly tight-knit club kids to begin separating. The dim end for the group was confirmed when former mayor Rudy Giuliani established a program known as the Quality of Life Crackdown in the 1990s. This program focused on monitoring Manhattan nightclubs to remove the presence of drugs, violence, and indecent behavior. With the lead member of the group now incarcerated and the government pushing restrictions on nightlife, the group had no reason to remain whole. The film Glory Days takes an in-depth look at the previous club kids' lifestyle and their eventual downfall from fame and fun. While it may not be a scary story, it's an interesting topic with many elements that may shock you. Number 3. H.H. Holmes, also known as Herman Webster Mudgett, is considered America's first serious serial killer. The story of Holmes is twisted and absolutely dreadful. Holmes first made a name for himself in the late 1800s as a con artist and bigamist. He was the subject of over 50 lawsuits in Chicago, but was believed to be involved in countless others. Based on witness testimonies, Holmes was a charming, determined, and successful entrepreneur, with a huge collection of friends, business partners, and acquaintances. At the time, these personality traits made it more difficult to confirm his guilt. Many people failed to believe that someone so popular and friendly was the source of such darkness. Of course, we now know that these traits are common amongst psychopaths and serial killers. As for his crime spree, it was confirmed that his first attack was against his then mistress, Julie Smith. The first crime led to a series of others which spanned over a decade. He was first incarcerated in 1894 on account of selling mortgaged goods. However, he devised another scam, which resulted in an insurance payout, which he then used to pay his bail and leave prison. He continued to collect this award amount for several following years, as his more heinous crimes increased in number. It's important to remember that during this era, little technology and very few methods were available to investigate a gruesome crime scene. DNA could not be matched to Holmes at the time, and considering he left a pretty clean slate behind, he was not immediately apprehended, though detectives had a feeling he was the main suspect in many cases. Holmes owned a building in Inglewood, Texas. The building apparently served as a location of many different uses. Mostly it was referred to as a hotel, although no county records confirm the building was ever used as such. Many of Holmes' victims were believed to have been attacked inside of this building, and after 2 deaths occurred in Texas, investigators pointed their attention at Holmes' building, where he found evidence of blood and a struggle. Sadly, none of this evidence was actually confirmed to match Holmes or any of his victims due to a lack of DNA technology. The diabolical serial killer's crime spree finally ended when he was arrested in Boston on November 17, 1894. He was put on trial for one case and found guilty. While imprisoned, investigators found reason to believe Holmes was responsible for several other cases. However, he was already sentenced to death, so the other cases were not pursued. While in custody, he admitted to at least 27 crimes in which he took someone's life. 9 of those cases were confirmed, and oddly enough, some of the crimes he took responsibility for concerned people that either survived his attack or never even had an interaction with him. He was hung as punishment on May 7, 1896 at the age of 34. To this day, Holmes is a popular topic when it comes to serial killers, and even media presence in criminal cases. The documentary that follows his life and crimes is titled H.H. Holmes, America's First Serial Killer. The film was released as a documentary in 2004, and it covers the history of Holmes' crimes, his victims, witnesses, professional statements, and media presence. Some believe that Holmes was wrongfully convicted, describing the story of his criminal activity as a tall tale that derived from true facts. Another issue that's explored in the gripping film. Number 2. The Confessions of Thomas Quick was a 2015 documentary that followed the life and crimes of a Swedish man previously believed to be a serial killer. This film covers a very different aspect than most serial killer documentaries. Instead, this film focuses on misjustice and the process of collecting evidence for crimes. Between 1993 and 2002, Thomas allegedly carried out a series of crimes that resulted in the passing of at least 30 victims. He was later convicted of 8 confirmed crimes despite confessing to 30. As far as the other victims, officers apparently used minimal convicting evidence against Tom. He revoked his confession in 2008 after serving time in a mental institution. Thomas reported later that his previous confession was brought out by unfair therapy used on him in the hospital. After this, investigators looked into the work of their peers to find officers that used false evidence against Tom and found him guilty. According to the Wikipedia page concerning the documentary that covered Thomas, a 2015 documentary film, The Confession of Thomas Quick, recounted Bergwall's life and his murder confessions and retractions, including interviews with Bergwall and other participants in the event. In it, Bergwall explained that he made the confessions to gain attention due to profound loneliness. The documentary claims that Bergwall knew little about each murder, but was fed details during questioning, enabling him to build up enough information to persuade people that he'd carried them out. It also claims that as a result of his confessions, Bergwall was given privileged treatment in the hospital, including drugs and therapy on demand, his own office with a computer and internet access, and restaurant meals when going out to visit murder sites, and that this may have encouraged him to continue confessing to more and more crimes. The documentary film, directed by Brian Hill, dives deeply into the accusations against Thomas, his previous confessions, and the overall misuse of justice that took place throughout his interrogation and trial. Number 1. Josef Fritzl, Story of a Monster, was a documentary film released in 2010 that closely researched the story of Josef Fritzl's daughter, who'd spent time in captivity, undergoing abuse from her father. Interviews with witnesses, professionals, and officers retell the horrifying story of Elizabeth Fritzl, who was locked in her cellar of her own home by her father against her will in August of 1984. When she was first locked away, she was just on the brink of turning 18. She was concealed and she was subjected to heinous abuse, especially of the non-consensual sexual nature. She was confined for 24 years, during which time she gave birth to 7 of her father's children. 3 of these children were kept in captivity with Elizabeth, and 1 sadly passed away after being burned by Josef, and the other 3 were raised by Josef and his wife in the family home. The news of this unsettling case didn't become public until 2008, when the victim came forward to law enforcement officials to confess the horrendous conditions she was held captive in. A long, tiring trial followed the public announcement, and Josef was arrested a short time later and was put on trial in 2009, where he was found guilty. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, and while serving his time, the film over the case was released, which featured shockingly intense details of captivity shared by Elizabeth and dark reenactments of her life. The most astonishing and appalling content of all is related to the special interviews conducted in the film. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos. And if you enjoyed this narration, maybe consider checking out my personal channel at youtube.com/Ty_knots.